A website is never finished, especially a B2B tech website. Welcome to ForwardSlash, the podcast that explores how B2B tech companies can leverage their websites to achieve fast, efficient, predictable, and scalable growth. In each episode, I take a big issue affecting the B2B tech landscape and then pick the brains of marketing leaders around the world to learn how the issue affects the questions B2B tech marketers should be asking about their websites and how to answer them. Let's get into it. Pedro Clivati, head of growth at Growth Hackers and an established leader in the website experimentation space, which we're going to be diving into pretty deeply today. Thank you so much for joining me, man. How's it going?
Hey, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. I think it's all over the place, end of the year, Black Friday, Thanksgiving, Christmas, OKRs, and etc. But so far, so good.
Yeah, end of the year is always interesting. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. I think most people listening have heard of Growth Hackers, at least the community, and to a lesser extent, the Growth Hackers University, but perhaps aren't familiar with more of the product side, enterprise side of Growth Hackers. So I'd like to start there. Can you tell me a little bit about Growth Hackers products, what they do, and really how they came to be? Because I think that's kind of an interesting tale in and of itself also.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it always started we used to say that we went the opposite way that normally SaaS businesses usually go through. They usually create a product, from that they create a blog, from the blog a community, from the community online university, and etc. We went in the totally opposite direction. We actually started with Sean actually writing a book to kind of trying to organize the idea of growth hacking as a methodology, right? So I would love to start with that, because there's a lot of misconception about what is growth. And from our point of view, growth hacking is actually the constant process of experimentation. So that doesn't mean that you're going to be hacking your way up, or you're going to be using black hat tactics, or you're going to get people addicted to your app, as some Netflix documentary have reinforced. We usually just look at growth as a constant and conscious process of experimentation. So by constant, we mean that it's a never-ending process of experimentation. If you solve an issue, or if you have uncovered an opportunity, then you move on to the next experiment, right? And conscious, because you're not going to be randomly running tests all over the place. Every test needs to be aligned with whatever the company is heading towards to. So we ensure that the growth strategy is actually well aligned with the company strategy, and then we implement a constant process of experimentation, right? So I guess that's the first thing. And the intention of the book was precisely that. How can I actually organize testing as a methodology so companies can implement that as an ongoing process? And if we think about it, basically everything comes down to that. Inbound marketing as a methodology that most of the concepts of that inbound marketing takes, emails, blogging, content marketing, and lead nurturing, all of that already existed. But inbound is a methodology that puts everything in place. The same for content marketing, the same for SEO. And growth, it's no different. So we actually, it's a methodology for you to create a strategy and operationalize tests as an ongoing process, right? So going back to your original question, the book led us to actually create a community, because everyone was reading the book, a few millions of copies sold. If I'm not mistaken, it got translated into 15 different languages.
Wow.
And everyone that was reading that was yeah, how do I talk with other growth people? How can I brainstorm and network with everyone that is reading? So that led us to create a community. And from the community, people were exchanging information, networking their way up, and etc. That led us to create an online university, which is pretty much kind of the same thing that the book offers, but in a different format. Some people rather just watch and learn, others read and learn, others do and learn, which is exactly what led us to the product itself. Most of the things were organic as a next step in the company. And the product was no different, meaning a lot of people were growth eventually became a serious department in a lot of companies. right? Like there was like data science and someone dedicated for growth and a designer and a marketer, and that squads and business units, it got professional in a whole new level. And people like spreadsheets were no longer able to handle everything that comes with growth. So we came up with this project management tool built and designed for growth teams. And the main difference between most of the project management tools out there is that it's one integrated with external tools. Growth teams usually has that on their DNAs that like they are cross-functional, right? They're helping acquisition and then activation and then retention and then revenue. That basically means that your intersection with other departments is huge. So both in terms of people that you're going to be working with, but also tools that you're going to have to deal with, right? CRM, marketing automation, products, segment, like customer behavioral data tools, and etc. So our intention with our platform was to help growth teams navigate those cross-department projects, break down the silos, and simply pretty much like organize their process in a centralized way. So everything comes down to the platform. We consider ourselves to be the layer of organization upon everything that the growth team is doing, connecting KPIs, creating idea backlog, actually running the experiment. And as a last like differentiator from most project management tools is that we actually integrate with those tools. So that basically means that you can collect data as the results of your experiment automatically and just add the qualitative part of your analysis and conclusions. So cool. Sorry for the long answer.
That was perfect. Thank you. One thing I'm curious about is what was the timeline progression of Growth Hackers? Like the book was published first. When did the community come? When did the university get added? And then when finally did the products? I think the products are relatively recent, right? Like this has been like a 10-year, 15-year journey for you guys, right?
Yeah, I would say like 7, 8 up to 10 years or something. In terms of like order, it was book, community, university, and product. Oh, and there's also the conference that we run on a yearly basis. That's another asset. So I don't recall precisely the years that everything happened. And from a platform point of view, it started out as a free product. So we released that to every community member, like 500, 1,000 community members could get access to that. There was no charge. And we started to reiterate based on their feedbacks as everything that we have done, right? Like as a result of their feedbacks, we keep creating, we keep reiterating, we keep testing. And with the product was no different. So initially it was built precisely like step by step, point by point, bullet by bullet, what the methodology suggests. But the methodology itself has evolved a lot. So there's no, like nowadays, there's no like one single way that you can implement a growth strategy in your company. Some companies use like the North Star metric, objectives and ideas concept. Some others use the one metric that matters. Some others use a whole new concept. And even the step-by-step process, ideation, prioritization, testing, and analysis has also evolved a lot. So the way that the product has evolved was pretty much like becoming more flexible to adapt to all of those different demands, right? So we like initially was like you either follow what we are suggesting or you're probably going to get stuck at some point. But nowadays it's like it's quite flexible in a way that you can adapt the platform to your process and not the other way around. So both in terms of like framework, strategy building, how you organize your KPIs, and etc. So now, like even though the tool was initially built for growth teams to manage their strategy and processes, nowadays there are people like managing their product roadmap in the platform, or their OKRs, like keeping track of OKRs in the platform. So there's so many different use cases nowadays, and we keep like adding more flexibility into the product so you can keep customizing it and adapting to your own needs and processes.
Gotcha. A lot of good stuff there. I obviously want to talk about growth as it pertains to B2B SaaS companies, but I wanted to set the stage, provide this kind of backdrop first with 5 core issues that are at play within the B2B SaaS space. I'm going to go ahead and list them out. The first issue is this economic downturn that we're in, right? There's a lot more uncertainty. Wallets are harder to open. There are longer sales cycles, fewer trials and demos. Issue number 2, it's just a hyper-competitive space to begin with, just B2B SaaS in general, and especially if we're talking about MarTech, very convoluted, dense space. Third issue, I think there's been this sole focus on demand capture, and we call it demand generation, but I think that there's a little confusion around that phrase where we think we're creating demand, but we're actually just capturing it. Fourth issue, which I think is the most interesting, I think I got this from Trust Radius. 65% of tech buyers are millennials at large corporations, and they prefer to control their own journeys, these dark journeys. So I think like all of these issues are at play right now, and it's making things very difficult for marketers operating in the B2B SaaS space, whether they're self-imposed or not. Do you agree with everything? Are you seeing the same thing on your end? And is there anything that you would add to that?
Remember back in the days, like, I don't know, 8-9 years ago, there was this infographic, like the MarTech landscape.
Yeah,
like
right.
That guy, I don't recall his name, but I think it was Scott or something, and he listed like every tool, and he could segment them, and every year he keeps adding more logos into that infographic until, like, I guess 4 or 5 years ago he just stopped doing it because he couldn't fit more logos into the same infographic. It becomes too crowded. There's too many solutions, and you're going to be competing with everyone, like China, with the United States, with Latin America, with Europe. And that's a reality that we got to accept. It's not going to change, right? So whenever you're in the early stage of a company and you're pitching your product to a venture capitalist, you're going to have to prove that your total addressable market is huge. So whenever you're in that stage, most of the times you're going to prove that your total addressable market is huge enough for them to invest, right? Like, even if I capture just 10% of that market, I'm going to have a couple of $1 billion company that can get you like a 100x return. And they start their companies and their marketing strategy and their sales strategy actually targeting that whole total addressable market. And I would definitely not start with that. So even if we think about like Amazon nowadays, is they start off everything, and they are leaders on hardware, on software, on data, on cloud, on logistics, on e-commerce, and etc. But they started out with books, online books, because that was a niche that he conquered like almost 100% of their sales before expanding that into new verticals and adding more categories and etc. Sean has this formula for you to validate, like there's a whole bunch of different like definitions of product market fit, right? But I like Sean's because it helps you measure product market fit. And he just suggests like, all right, so interview your customers and try to get up to 40 or 50% of them. Ask them, how would they feel if you no longer existed? And you should be getting up at least 40% of your customers saying that they would be dissatisfied if you no longer exist. If you get to those 40%, you can kind of assume that you have product market fit. And then
it's almost like an inverted NPS score, if you will.
Yeah, correct. And the point of doing that is not only to validate that you get product market fit, but to narrow down the positioning, the messaging, the pricing, and your first customers to that precise group or cohort of users. If you try to please everyone, you're probably not gonna please anyone. It's a reality that we're gonna be competing with a whole bunch of people. Second, what is that specific niche that I can satisfy super well? And one great example of that is the Superhuman app, the email app. It's just crazy to think about it. Like, I'm going to create a product and I'm going to compete with Gmail and everyone that offers that for free. And I'm going to charge them and I'm going to be better than them. How did they do it? Like, even though their product was good, the first thing that they did was actually tailor that down to a specific niche of people that really valued what they were offering. And that was not like students or academics or salespeople or customer service people. they figured out that the C-level was the people, like, were the kind of people that really value their product for what it was. If I narrow it down to that specific niche, even if I have to manually onboard those users, even if I had to charge less for them, am I able to satisfy them to get like the 40% of them? Another fun thing about it is that when they were interviewing them, their users, I usually say that initially you don't have a funnel. You should have kind of a tube, like let everyone that comes in like buy your product, even if they're not able to pay what you are asking, or if they are not what you initially thought should be your audience or your ideal customer profile. Just let them in, because at that point, quality of feedback, it's more important than the quantity of customers that you have. Because what I wanted to figure out is exactly who am I trying to satisfy. That is going to help me both like position my product, the message on my website, the way that I'm going to price, if I'm going to go with product-led growth, or if I'm going to be a sales driving company. Of course that we think about it and we plan in advance, and there's a lot of ideas coming and going. But at the end of the day, it comes down to how you're going to satisfy them, and figuring out who you want to satisfy. That's the first step that a lot of us jump. Thinking about it like from a rational perspective, a lot of the times you probably shouldn't be heading that way. And PLG is also another example of that. Like having a product ready for you to launch for the customers to satisfy themselves on their own, it's not something easy. It's something that takes not only resources, but time, and you got to have all your data in place and being able to capture how your customer is feeling with your product, even if you're not actually watching it and not collecting feedbacks because you're not on the phone and etc. So I guess like it comes down to timing and better prioritizing the initiatives that you're going to focus on. And that leads me back to the example of the Superhuman app. Initially, like every customers, they were onboarding, like it's an email app that was charging, I don't know, $90 a month or something among those lines.
Gotcha.
So in other words, if they don't scale, they were never going to be able to make money, right? Even taking that into consideration, they were still manually onboarding every customer by phone initially, because quality was more important than quantity of customers. And if you came in, and even if you want to pay, if you're not part of that group that they knew they could deliver value, you wouldn't be able to buy your product. So you're like, from one hand, some of your metrics are not going to look that beautiful because you could be adding more customers, you could be sending more invoice. On the other hand, your retention rate is going to be great, your upsell and cross-sell rate is going to be better, and the graphics that you decided to show your investors are also going to reflect that.
A lot of good stuff there that I'd like to unpack further if we can. This whole idea of the different growth models that you can take, right? Whether it's product-led, marketing-led, sales-led, founder-led, but then also the implications that it has on content strategy. And especially earlier on, I'm finding like that's a really heated conversation as far as like, okay, do we go the content creation method where we're just building out all this content versus paid methodology, where it's like you turn that faucet on and you're essentially just allowing your sales team, marketing, what have you, to get as many at bats as possible. So I'm kind of curious from your standpoint, growth hackers, it seems like you can have like this interesting mixture of different sorts. Like you have your growth enterprise products, your experimentation and content operations products. Traditionally, that's going to be sales led, right? If we're talking enterprise solutions, right? There could obviously be a little mix there, but that's traditionally. You have your community, right? So that kind of brings in this whole community growth. You have your university product. It's kind of this cool combination of community and product. So I'm curious, how would you categorize Growth Hackers' enterprise products growth model?
So that's a really good question. And there are many different angles that we could tackle, but let me start with that's precisely the case for growth as an experimentation program. Because when I told you the story of Growth Hackers, I mentioned everything that we have nowadays. What I didn't mention was everything that we did that didn't work. right?
Mm-hmm.
And for us to get to those assets that we have nowadays, there are more failures than there is existing assets that succeed. That's simply the path. Like there's no other way around it, right? That's precisely because like the reason why we have a growth team and we always run experiments to try to validate it. We probably can find a success case to prove any strategy that we run. Like you should be doing content, we should be doing paid, and there's no issue getting our customers with paid media. If we dive deep enough, we're gonna find a success story to prove any point that we want. So it comes down to like, there's no way for you to know exactly what's going to work if you don't try it out. So ideally, what a growth team is doing is actually like the same concept that a startup uses to validate their product, the MVP, minimum viable product. The growth team will be having the minimum viable experiment. There is no way for you to know exactly what is going to work. Like, of course, you can keep trying to gather enough data to see if that is the direction that you should be heading or not. But I guess like the fastest path to actually get to that answer is just by trying it out. So a lot of people are looking at growth as a nice to have department in your company. And I know that I'm biased to say since I'm from Growth Hackers, but I see that as an essential way for you to actually save money. It's a way for you to test things out without actually messing up with your departments. Instead of actually allocating resources from my marketing team that knows precisely what they should be doing to do something that they don't know how to do it, I'm going to send that mission to the growth team. And if turns out to be true, like if they come back with data that's proving the point, then we can decide if we want to incorporate that into our operations, right? So like I like to see the growth team as kind of like the safe space for us to make bets, because if everything goes wrong, then we know exactly how bad it can go. But if everything works, then the upside is simply unlimited. For Growth Hackers as a company, we have always looked at our issues on that way. We do a whole bunch of stuff. A lot of them don't work, and we simply leave it behind and move on to the next objective, the next experiment, the next project. So it's an ongoing, never-ending process of experimentation. And what remains are the assets that we mentioned. The community pretty much as the top of the funnel. Now we have a premium community as like the bottom of the funnel. We have the university as the middle of the funnel. And our final offer, like the way that our company actually monetizes everything, it's through our product. But it doesn't make sense for me to keep offering the product for someone who just figured out what is growth. Like they're going to see the value in our product once they have an ongoing operation, once like the company is already testing things, when they want to scale that, when they want to like scale both in terms of the number of experiments or the number of people involved or the number of departments that they're tackling. Once they start to scale that and compliance comes in and there's security concerns and etc., then our product actually delivers the value. So yeah. And
Gotcha.
One last thing that I would add to that is that like once we actually release the product to the entire community, it came with like solopreneurs, agencies, startups, mid-sized companies, enterprise companies, they all came in. And usually like the people who gets most excited about these new tools are like startuppers and early adopters and stuff, right? So they get super excited. It made us think and say, hey, that's exactly the people that we should be tackling, right? They love our product, but it was free for everyone. So the data might be misleading on that sense, because it took us a while to realize that the companies that actually sees value in our product are large companies. They don't get excited about new products. They're not going to be like praising your product on Twitter saying, I love these. So I could easily be changing like our entire existing strategy to a PLG strategy and just like launch freemiums, launch trials, launch everything, which could work super well if I was targeting startups or mid-sized business. But honestly, for enterprise businesses, that we need to prove security protocols or certifications and talk with the procurement company and run like exposure to our database and etc. Use our data and fill up forms and etc. and compliance stuff. That's simply no way that a product-led growth approach would help us with that.
I'd like to focus on the acquisition part, specifically the website. if you're able to speak to the successful experiments that you're seeing your customers conducting, is there a specific hero design that you're seeing pushing the most demos or trials, or is there specific careers page formatting?
I wouldn't know how to say exactly which direction your experiment should be heading, but something that we have seen across the board among our clients is that the best source of ideas for your experiments usually comes from customer feedbacks and internal sources. We tend to look at market data and benchmarks and see what our competitors are doing, and looking at the leader in the category to watch what they're doing. So that's probably why you see so many Stripe-like websites all around the globe. Everyone is copying Stripe and stuff. And Stripe, they do have an amazing website, but is that right fit for your customer? I don't know. In terms of sources from the best ideas, it usually comes within. Meaning your sales team, it's constantly talking with your leads. Your customer success team is all day long talking to your customers. And then whenever you want an idea to test, you go to a community and see what others are doing. So why don't you go back home and ask them what they have been hearing from the customers and from the leads and from the demos and etc. Usually, and not saying only for our customers, but even inside our own growth team, usually the best ideas are coming from our customers, our sales teams, and our customer service team. What happens is if a company is not incentivizing customers to embrace idea suggestion and to take risks and etc., someone from the marketing team is not going to be suggesting an idea for the sales team. Someone from the sales team is not going to be suggesting an idea for the customer service team, whatever it is, right? So it limits how rich your ideas for new experiments can go. But I would definitely just go back to the marketing, to the sales customer service team, and just brainstorm with them. Say, hey guys, there's literally no downside into suggesting an idea. If it goes wrong, I take the blame. If it goes right, you take the fame, and let's do it together. Just speak up. And from there, it's pretty much about testing. I wouldn't be in a position to tell you exactly which patterns I would follow and etc.
Sure.
Because again,
it changes.
I learned that the hard way, because our team at our growth team at Growth Hackers, they're super good. I'm super proud of my team, right? From the web designer to the data science to the marketer that is helping me, everyone. But they're so good that we're wrong a lot of the times. What I mean by that is I don't know your opinion about it, but whenever I log onto Amazon's website, I find it terrible. It's not easy for us to just navigate, and I'm pretty sure that it's not lack of resources, or there's no lack of resources in Amazon to rebuild their entire website. You know why is that way? It's because it works. It's because that's what it's converts the best. I'm pretty sure they have done thousands and thousands of tests, and it's that way because it works, because it has the highest conversion rate, and they keep doing it. So so that's it. I guess that's one of the reasons why we do have whenever ideas are coming from the growth team, they don't have the same success rate that whenever they come within. So what I would say about it is just speak, listen to your customers through your internal members mostly, and try things out, because we could be super experts, better than I do how to actually design a homepage and watch tests. And it comes down to that, I guess, how can we understand what our customers would like instead of our own preferences or something like that.
Yeah, and it's just kind of hearing you talk through that. If anything, it seems like kind of a great way to align marketing and sales just in general, because that's like the conversations that you're having as far as like, okay, sales is hearing this from the customers. Let's test this messaging on the homepage and the hero component, or maybe on the the use case pages, because they're starting to get understanding of all of the different granular use cases that their customers are using this product. There's this whole conversation around like RevOps and whatnot, and it's breaking down the silos between marketing, sales, and customer service. And it seems like this kind of conversation around experimentation is a way to either help a bridge gap or start a way to bridge that gap for companies who are kind of struggling with those silos.
Exactly. Yeah.
Great, man. This has been great. I didn't think we were going to take a full hour, but we definitely did. I've got a couple of rapid fire questions for you, if you don't mind hanging around for a couple more minutes. So one thing that I'm making sure to ask all of the guests that I bring on, and I think I know what you're going to say here, but what's one thing that you wish more B2B SaaS marketers, what have you, would do more of?
Fast.
There you go. Right. and test quickly, it sounds like.
Test quickly. Yeah. I guess like something that it's important to highlight is also like whenever you're talking about whenever I'm talking about a constant process of experimentation, that doesn't mean that you should be randomly throwing tests all over the place and just throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. Like every test should have a final objective. I mean, like tests and experiments and hypotheses and ideas, they are means to an end. So you do need to define what is the end before starting with the means. And so that's why the most successful teams, growth teams that I know of, they're also the ones failing the most. So what does that mean? It means that in terms of experiments, the experiment might not succeed. Like from 10 experiments, they might run like 9 experiments that didn't work. But the one that worked has helped them achieve the end result. So it's a never-ending process, but you do need to ensure that it's like aligned with the company expectation and the end result that you're expecting, right? So I guess it's important to highlight that, because I wouldn't just like get out of here and start just testing everything all over the place. Otherwise, you're probably gonna like hit some stuff, right? But that the perception of the rest of the company will be all right. So he got like 2% improvement on that direction, 3% on that direction, 3% on that direction. So it's really not like noticeable for everyone else, like the impact that you have caused. So instead of going in every direction, pick one objective and have 100% improvement on that direction. Then you move to the next one. So that's like Elon talks about like vectors alignment, right? Instead of throwing like on every direction, just choose one. That's gonna make your life easier for you to say which experiment you should be saying yes to, which you should be saying no to, and also easier for you to show the value that you're bringing to the organization to the rest of the company.
Makes sense. Beautifully said. Obviously the Growth Hackers community is a great resource, the university, for those who have a little bit of money to spend on continuing education. Are there any other resources that you recommend out there from an experimentation or even content operations? We haven't really spoken about that today, but you do have the Growth Hackers content operations product. Any other resources or experts that you can recommend listeners to check out?
Yeah, so what else?
So many.
There's so many. I recently, usually I have been getting my sources from Twitter mostly.
What do you think about Twitter's trajectory right now, by the way?
I honestly love it.
It's funny who you ask, and it's always the marketers who are like, the vision is great, right? Yeah. But I feel like everybody outside the space is like, I hate Elon Musk. I hate him like viscerally as a human. So anything that he does is going to be just like fucked up. But it's like, it's funny when you talk to marketers, it's like he kind of he's flipping that model on its head, and I kind of like it. So that's kind of interesting.
Me too. Like, I don't know where it's going to land, but I like the changes that he's making. And I'm not like going to like how good of a boss he is, but how good of an entrepreneur he is. Then that it's hard to have an argument against that. Like most of the things that he does, it really kind of like end up working pretty well, I would say, right? And like also, but I guess like the thing about he is that he does everything publicly, and he likes like the buzz around it, right? But most of the times, like whenever a private equity buys a firm, it tends to be a lot worse than what Elon's doing. Just they just do it quietly. And Elon does this like pretty loudly. So
Mhm.
I got like
The public building mentality, I guess.
yes. I was reading a thread from that. I'm not sure if he's current CEO or the ex-CEO of Reddit, and he was like describing the playbook for whenever someone buys a company, and it's pretty much like you could see exactly what Elon's doing, it's step by step. So I'm not sure like if that's indeed what he's doing, but yeah, I'm
Interesting either way. It's great theater at the end of the day. Just seeing everything unfold.
Can't wait
Cool.
for the second phase of the Twitter files. Let's
Right. That's great. Last question. Where can listeners get in touch with you?
So yeah, LinkedIn or Twitter, Pedro Clivati. I haven't found any other Pedro Clivati, so whenever you search me, you're probably gonna find myself. So yeah,
Awesome.
And yeah, like we'd love to keep this conversation going. And again, that was super fun. Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me. I have learned, and I hope the listeners too.
Totally. Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much for your time, man. We're just getting this thing off the ground, this podcast. So it's awesome to have your support and come on and yeah, like truthfully, this was very fruitful for me as well. Learned a lot. And something that we can take to a lot of information that we can take to the agency and improve our own processes. Once again, thanks, man. And yeah, hopefully we can have another conversation like this shortly.
Me too, man. Yeah, love what you guys are doing, and happy to be a part of it.